Yo everyone, welcome to my predictions and breakdown of the entire UFC Fight Night Machado Garry vs Prates fight card. There's actually a few very solid fights on this card, but I also do think this card is pretty favorite heavy, and what I mean by that is there's quite a few massive favorites on this card that should be getting the dub a large majority of the time. So most of the time, you may see that people's predictions will most likely be pretty similar to one another. Before we get into this video, however, like I always do, let's quickly go back and talk about how we did on the previous fight card, which was UFC 314 Volkanovski vs Lopez, and oh my god guys, I couldn't be any more relieved and ecstatic that Volk has once again become the featherweight champ. Insanely smart performance from him, and to give Diego Lopez a lot of credit, it wasn't insanely dominant since he hurt Volk multiple times in this fight. Overall, the fight card was pretty good though. We went very well on picks, going 10-3 on picks overall, and pretty well on bets too as well, with a profit of around 18% on the card overall. Just showing the overall bet results on the screen for you guys now, and we are looking to keep this success going with this card as well. Trying to build a streak going here, guys. I will be posting the full card betting guide as well for this card later on this week, so make sure you keep an eye out for that video if you want to know what my personal bets, locks of the card, solid favorites, solid underdogs of the card will be. I also want to talk about the new addition to the videos that I've been adding, which is the subscribers bet of the week. I want you guys to go into the comment section below and let me know what your favorite bet is for this card, and I'll be taking one person's bet to add to the betting guide for this week. This may be a specific bet that I like, or even the top comment with the most likes on the video. So if you guys think you've got a solid bet in mind, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and you may see your comment and bet in the newest betting guide as an addition to the bets. Anyways guys, to finally jump into the video, I'll be starting with the prelims and working my way all the way to the main event. Timestamps are in the description and the comment section below if you'd like to skip to any fight in particular. We're going to be starting with the first fight of the card, which is Chelsea Chandler versus Joselyne Edwards. And this is a pretty interesting fight to start off the card, but I'm honestly surprised that Joselyne Edwards isn't a bigger favorite going into this fight. At the time of recording this video, she's around a -250 favorite, I believe, and that's in Aussie currency, of course. I know there's the grappling threat of Chelsea Chandler, but Joselyne Edwards has really shown some improvement in her takedown defense, and unless you have some really solid grappling like a Nora Canol or Eileen Perez, I don't think you're going to be able to take down or keep down someone like Joselyne Edwards very easily. I think Chelsea Chandler, she really has nothing going for her on the feet, and solely will need to rely on her physicality and her grappling to win this fight. And I can just see Joselyne Edwards being able to keep distance, shuck her off some of the takedowns, and beat her up on the outside for pretty much the entirety of the fight. So to add on top of that, Joselyne Edwards is actually pretty savvy as well on the feet, and she's looked pretty impressive in most of her fights. She hits pretty hard, her kicks are pretty good, her punches are pretty solid too. I'm going to go with her to get this one done. I'm not going to add it to my confident picks list, but I probably will put something on this later on when more lines open up for this fight, so look out for a bet on this fight. Moving on to Timmy Cuamba versus Roberto Romero. Now, this is a pretty interesting matchup, and currently, at the time of making this video, I believe there are no odds out for this fight. And I think the Chris Gutierrez fight against John Castaneda is quite similar as well. I've heard it's around dead even, so I will look into that really quickly too right now. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have any of the odds mentioned for these two fights. I think that a lot of people have been favoring Roberto Romero, so he probably will end up being the slight favorite over Timmy Cuamba, especially since he's looked pretty solid on short notice against David Onama, whereas Timmy Cuamba, he's coming off of 2 losses in his 2 recent fights, with his most recent loss being against Lucas Almeida, where he was dropped multiple times early in that fight. But honestly, you know what, guys? I think I might still pick Timmy Cuamba to get this one done. I do think this is going to be a pretty competitive fight for the most part, and with how durable both of these guys seem to be, I think it'll most likely go to decision as well. I still think that even though Timmy Cuamba is coming off of a 2-fight loss streak, he's still relatively technical on the feet. He's quite powerful. He's got great footwork. He's pretty solid as a counterpuncher. And although Romero is a fantastic pressure fighter who's not afraid to eat a shot to give a shot, I think he's not as light on the feet and as technical, especially from the outside, as someone like a Balaji Oki or a Lucas Almeida. And don't get me wrong, Roberto is dangerous, and he does have a great chance to win this fight with his pressure and his pace, but it'll be hard to maintain that pressure for longer than a round or two. And although he looked good against David Onama, he quite visibly slowed down after the first round of that fight, and he started to take way more damage later on than he probably should have. I also thought about how accepting Roberto Romero was to being taken down and accepting of bottom position in that fight too, and that is really not good in this matchup since Timmy Cuamba is a pretty solid grappler. He's got a very solid way of locking his hands, and the dude does quite a bit of solid ground and pound too when he gets on top position, which I do really love about him. I really don't like when dudes get into solid positions and don't work while they're there. Timmy Cuamba is pretty good at that. I can really see him going back and forth on the feet with Romero, doing pretty decently, but then being able to secure the takedown at some point in this fight and putting in some solid work on the ground. So I'm going to say this fight goes to decision. I'm going to call it 29-28 for Timmy Cuamba. I think it'll be pretty close. I reckon he loses the first round after withstanding a very heavy pace, but then he wins the second and third by mixing in his grappling. So that's my pick for this fight, honestly. I think this one ends up being an underdog as well, so I reckon this will be an underdog pick by the time I do the betting guide. But moving on to Jaqueline Amorim versus Polyana Viana, and honestly, sometimes I just feel like it's very hard to go all in on a WMMA fighter in this current day and age. Maybe it was every current day and age, but I know after watching a bunch of fight tape though, and looking at the odds here with Jaqueline Amorim being a -550 favorite right now, she should be a slam dunk pick. Amorim has the grappling ability to take down Polyana Viana. She's got the submission ability to finish her as well on the ground. So there is a large likelihood in this fight, if Amorim takedowns Viana, she is able to finish her as well. So maybe a bet on Amorim by finish or sub, depending on what the odds are, could be the best bet for this fight. Or even a flat out bet, depending on the odds, but that is what I can see happening a large majority of the time, and Amorim will be my pick for this fight. But I'm just hesitant to put it in my confident picks list. I've had so many massive WMMA favorites in my parlays that have lost, especially by KO in the last like 4 months or so. And I think it's just a worry of mine, but I do have to get over it. Jaqueline Amorim by submission or ground and pound finish, putting her in my confident picks list as well. I think she gets this one done rather easily. Wishing everyone the best of luck with this pick. And I really think she's only lost to Sam Hughes, and Sam Hughes was known for winning against a lot of solid prospects, and before that and after that, Amorim has been getting pretty much all finishes, so I think she is the right one to pick, guys. I'm going to go with her. Moving on to Malcolm Wellmaker versus Cameron Saaiman. Now, this is an insane matchup, and I'm really excited for this fight. I'm honestly pretty surprised with how good of a fighter Cameron Saaiman is. They've got Malcolm Wellmaker as a favorite over him right now, and I think it's got to be because Malcolm is very dangerous. He's known for his knockout power. He's got solid striking. It's also got to be combined with the fact that Cameron Saaiman is coming off of a knockout loss and 2 losses in a row, with the KO loss being recently to Peyton Talbot. He's taken a year off as well since that loss, and honestly, I think he comes back looking solid and gets a win as an underdog in this matchup versus Malcolm Wellmaker. I think Malcolm Wellmaker, he's super dangerous in the striking and definitely will have the power advantage, but Cameron Saaiman is the better overall fighter in my opinion, and I do expect him to mix in the grappling with his stand-up in this fight. I've watched back, at minimum, Malcolm Wellmaker's last 5 fights, guys, and I know he's been knocking out his opponents, but in the fights that did go to decision, his opponents had so much success slowing him down and working their striking when they implemented the grappling in those fights, and they had a lot of success with their grappling. I saw in his fight with Zachariah Kamara, and this was a fight, mind you, that people actually thought Zachariah won on the judges' scorecards, but watching it myself, I did agree that it was pretty close. I think I edged it to Malcolm Wellmaker watching it, but I think this is all pretty important to mention because Malcolm Wellmaker made these fights very, very close with these guys, and Zachariah's record was 2-1 going into that fight, and Taylor Moore, who also looked pretty solid in his fight with Malcolm Wellmaker, using his grappling and wrestling to wear him down, had a record of 11-7 going into that fight. So I just think that Cameron Saaiman has shown his grappling is not just solid either, but it's really solid. He's offensively good and defensively good as well, to the point where I feel confident in him to get this fight done with his grappling. And if you really want to watch more of Cameron Saaiman's grappling in particular, I would watch the Steve Kostlow fight, and just tell me he didn't look like a guy who had pretty high level grappling, a high level ability to scramble and work his way up with the grappling. I'd honestly feel more confident if this fight was around 5 rounds, because I think Cameron Saaiman's gas tank is also one of his advantages, but it is a 3-round fight. I think it's going to be relatively close, but I'm going to pick Cameron Saaiman to win this fight either by submission or a 29-28 decision, winning the second and third rounds with his grappling implemented. So solid underdog pick here. I think I will probably put a bet on it too. Moving on to Blackshear versus Alatengheili, and I'm just going to flat out say it, guys. I'm going to go with Blackshear to get this one done, but I do think this one needs quite a bit of explaining. I think he should be able to get this one done somewhat well on the feet as well. I think he should do quite well on the feet at some points in this fight. Whether it be Alatengheili as well that gets a takedown or Blackshear that gets a takedown, I think this fight will eventually go to the ground though, and I think that's where Blackshear will take over and will get a submission in this fight. I think Alatengheili is dangerous. I think he's a better striker overall, but I do think that Blackshear has a lot of great tools in his striking to make it very difficult for him. I do think it may start to get a little too difficult in the striking at some points for Alatengheili, just due to the crazy height and reach advantage in this fight that he's facing. And I do think at some point, and he seems to like to do this a lot, Alatengheili will shoot in for a takedown, and that will just be terrible for him since he's just not on the same level in terms of submission, grappling, and control as Blackshear. I could see Blackshear being able to reverse position and get on top after being taken down in this fight and just finding his way to some sort of submission like an armbar or rear naked choke. I also do think the odds are somewhat correct here, but I also think that it's not crazy for people to be picking Alatengheili because I do see a world where he's able to make this fight relatively dirty, clinch up a lot, and just try to outpace and outgrind a tired Blackshear to a decision win by being like a bit boring or a bit annoying in this fight. And I'm also going to let you guys know, I watched a lot of fight tape, you guys. I watched a lot of fight tape on Alatengheili to prepare for this pick. And I was just trying to watch a lot of fight tape to see what positions were bad relatively in the grappling exchanges, more specifically. And I was able to find his fight online where he lost to Alanbek Basimov. And that video link, guys, and that website, I thought I was just immediately installing a virus onto my PC. I was pretty concerned, but I was also able to watch the fight, and he just couldn't seem to do anything against his opponent, like chaining submissions, having so many submission attempts, and it just made me more confident in Blackshear to win this fight, especially by submission win. That's it for my explanation, guys, so don't worry about it. Blackshear is the pick. Moving on to Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda. I think this fight's going to be one that splits people's thoughts and opinions because I can see both arguments for Castaneda winning this fight and for Chris Gutierrez winning this, and it ends up just coming down to who I think wins this fight the majority of the time. And I'll just say this, I think that if John Castaneda wins this fight, it's by avoiding the majority of the damage from Chris Gutierrez, especially to the legs due to the low kicks. And he manages to mix in some solid takedowns in with his striking to secure the back, to get some solid control time, to pull out the win in this fight. I think Chris Gutierrez is relatively hard to finish, and I don't see Castaneda finishing him in this fight. Most of the time he wins this, to me personally at least, it's by decision win with the grappling advantage. But on the other hand, with Chris Gutierrez, I think the ways he wins this fight are by KO finish, by accumulated damage towards Castaneda, or by decision win. I think he takes a lot less damage than John Castaneda in his fights, and he's usually able to chop the legs of his opponents and keep the distance from his opponents unless they are really, really strong and solid at taking people down and really solid at stand-up as well. So they're good overall fighters like Song Yadong, where Song was able to implement the takedowns very, very well and do very, very well on the feet too. But this is just a tough one to choose, guys, and for some reason, I really feel like leaning towards Chris Gutierrez here since I've seen some pretty decent takedown defense against a lot of other opponents he's versed besides Song Yadong, and I just think he should be able to do a lot more damage on John Castaneda than vice versa, and especially early in this fight, which should help him slow down John Castaneda and help him defend the initial takedown attempts. Chris should be able to land the more damaging shots on the feet. John Castaneda is pretty durable, but he does not avoid damage, man. I think that's going to be a real issue for him in this fight, since Chris is super good at breaking down his opponents over time. And I just really hope to not see John Castaneda on Chris Gutierrez's back in the first round. I think that'll crush this pick, honestly. So maybe this might be a good pick, like a good proponent for a live bet, since if you see Castaneda being able to take him down easier than what I originally thought, or if John Castaneda is able to take his back relatively easily and get a good amount of control time, I'd probably be pretty safe to put a bet on Castaneda in this fight. Final prediction though, Chris Gutierrez will be the pick for this fight. Most likely by decision win, maybe even by TKO if he's looking really good in this fight, but this is still a relatively close pick. and I think this is as close to 50-50 as you're going to get, guys. But moving on to Evan Elder versus Ahmad Hassanzada. You know, with this pick, guys, I'm not going to lie to you, I've watched quite a bit of fight tape on both these guys, and both guys don't really jump out as impressive to me. I probably will end up deciding on Evan Elder to get this one done because I think his grappling is decent enough to not get ragdolled by Ahmad Hassanzada. I also think he's pretty solid on the feet. He's got some pretty powerful punches. I think Hassanzada looked relatively bad on the feet in the fights that I watched. He also looked completely spent in the second and third rounds of the fights that I watched, especially in the fight I watched, which was against Dylan Mantello. And in that fight, he won that fight, but he just looked completely destroyed at the end of the second round in that fight when he couldn't get his back or couldn't get the submission. And Mantello in that fight really couldn't defend a takedown to save his life. So it was a super disappointing watch, to be honest. And I don't know, guys. I think Evan Elder should be able to get this one done. He's just the more dangerous guy. Like I mentioned, he's better on the feet overall. I reckon he gets this one done by KO or decision. I think he's just going to be a bit too technical for him. I did see their fights with Nazim Sadikov, who is incredibly talented and crushing it in the UFC right now. And both these guys fought and lost to Nazim Sadikov, and they actually lost to him back-to-back, I believe. Hassanzada lost to him first, and then Evan Elder followed suit directly after. But both guys lost to him by finish as well. But Evan Elder actually looked pretty solid in that fight and had some pretty solid moments as well against Sadikov, which was very impressive to watch, actually, watching it back. So even though I said he looked relatively unimpressive, it was actually a pretty good performance by him. And when I watched Hassanzada fight Sadikov, he just got absolutely steamrolled, obliterated in that fight. He took so much damage in that fight before the finish. I think Evan Elder wins this fight, guys. That's who I'm picking to win this fight. We're moving on to the next fight up the card, Matt Schnell versus Jimmy Flick. And alrighty, guys, I'm just going to keep this relatively short. I think a lot of people are going to agree with me here as well. And actually, maybe not. Maybe not. I think a lot of people would agree with this or should agree with this. I think Matt Schnell is 100% the better fighter in this matchup, and he should be able to KO Jimmy Flick in this fight too. Matt Schnell, although he's lost a lot lately, his losses are to the absolute best of the best in the division. Whether it's being finished on the feet or being finished by sub, he's being finished by the very best, and Jimmy Flick is not looking good in my opinion, and he's not looking anywhere near as good as Matt Schnell is in his fights. And he isn't anywhere close to versing the same level of competition. He's had absolutely no stand-up game in his fights. I just think he's going to be able to struggle to get the takedown as well and to grapple against Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell's a pretty solid grappler. And although Matt Schnell is chinny, I'm not too worried for his chin against Jimmy Flick because Jimmy Flick, like I said, he doesn't really have the stand-up. And Matt Schnell's striking is actually pretty solid, and he's got some pretty decent power. So I'm going to say round 1 or round 2 TKO for Matt Schnell in this fight. I think we see a bit of a bounce back for Matt Schnell, and this is just because he's not versing an absolute killer in his division at this current time. So moving on, finally now to the main card, Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. And before we even get into this pick, I just want to put a reminder out there. If you do enjoy this content and want me to continue making these videos and my random MMA videos where I cover a wide variety of ideas and MMA news, please leave a like on the video and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, guys. But now to jump into Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz. I honestly think this is a pretty decent card if this is your main event opener, honestly. I like this fight. I do think that this is pretty lopsided, though, in the matchup department. I think this is a very terrible matchup for Andre Muniz, who relies pretty heavily on his grappling ability in his fights. I think Ikram Aliskerov is going to be able to be good enough and strong enough to stop the wrestling advantages of Andre Muniz and be able to shuck off that grappling exchange and be able to keep this one on the feet with Andre Muniz. And if that happens, Andre Muniz really doesn't have much on the way of striking for his opponents, and I think Ikram Aliskerov is relatively dangerous enough and technical enough with his striking that he should be able to get an early rounds TKO over Andre Muniz in this fight. That's how much of the striking advantage I believe he has over Andre Muniz. So Ikram Aliskerov by first or second round TKO is my pick for this fight. Moving on to Randy Brown versus Nicolas Dalby. Now before I even say too much about this fight, I'll mention this about Randy Brown. I actually thought he won his last fight against Brian Battle, and I thought he deserved to get that win. And I remember being super upset when he didn't get the decision win in that fight. And I put a massive, massive bet, probably the biggest bet I'd ever put on someone to win a fight on Randy Brown as a moderate underdog, and he ended up getting the loss in that fight. But nonetheless, guys, this is really just to say that I do think quite highly of Randy Brown. I think the dude is pretty underrated, and although he genuinely is up against a very tough dude in Nicolas Dalby, who not only has some pretty crazy breathing techniques inside the cage, but he's also extremely solid and has some pretty extremely solid wins, like a KO win over Gabriel Bonfim and an arguable robbery loss against Rinat Fakhretdinov. I still think Randy Brown gets this one done. I think the matchup favors him pretty heavily. I think he should be able to avoid, or at least not get dominated for too long in the grappling exchanges. I do think he does well on the feet for 3 rounds to secure a win, either a 29-28 decision or a 30-27 decision on the judges' scorecards. I think the ranginess is going to be a big problem for Nicolas Dalby. I think he's going to struggle more so in the first 2 rounds of the fight to keep track and get a hold of Randy Brown in this fight. And I think by that time, it's probably too late for him to get the win, because I don't really see him finishing someone like Randy Brown. I will say, though, that Dalby is a pretty solid underdog, and I do see a lot of people picking him to win this fight, so it might be worth to put him on the solid underdog list on my betting guide when it comes out. So he's pretty good. He's maintained a very high level for someone who's 40 years old, but I will be locking in Randy Brown to get this one done. Let's move on to the next fight of the card, which is Michel Pereira versus Abus Magomedov. This is a pretty hard one to pick. Super hard one, honestly. It's mostly because I've seen both these guys sort of gas out pretty heavily within 1 round or like a round and a half of a fight. But honestly, if I had to prefer one fighter over the other to get this one done, it would be Michel Pereira. I think he is the more dangerous fighter of the two. I think he's technically better as well with his submission grappling and his striking. So overall, he's probably just the better fighter. And although I do think there is potential for the ranginess of the kicks of Abus Magomedov to cause problems for him in this fight, the guy's just so good. He might be the best fighter in the division in the first round, guys. He just can't seem to keep the pace up, though, and if he gets smothered or if someone's able to slow his pace right down, it does massively affect his ability to get the finish, and the fight does usually end up going to the decision for him. If Michel Pereira has worked on his cardio, I could see him winning this fight potentially by 29-28 decision over Abus Magomedov, since Abus is known to slow down as well, but I really could see this fight ending in a finish for either of these fighters, since things are going to get really crazy early and really sloppy late. I think Michel Pereira by first round KO or submission is my personal pick for this fight. I could see Abus Magomedov get a finish over Michel Pereira by submission as well, if he doesn't manage his gas tank well in this fight. So super worried for this pick, but Michel Pereira is my pick for this fight. Moving on to the feature fight of the card, Giga Chikadze versus David Onama. This is a pretty amazing fight, guys. It's a super tough one for me as well. I just have to think about this. I think I saw on Tapology that a lot of people are favoring Giga Chikadze as well to win this fight. And this is pretty crazy because he is an underdog in this fight. He's like a 70% vote pick on Tapology as an underdog, which is just insane. And although I do agree with him being a pretty solid underdog to pick, I need to ask something of you guys, and this is for those people who are picking Giga Chikadze. So put your thoughts in the comments below about this certain statement, guys. But do you see Giga Chikadze winning this fight via decision, or do you see him catching David Onama and putting him away in this fight? Because for me personally, it's really hard for me to see him winning a decision in this fight, since Onama's really good at pressuring his opponents. He's really good at doing solid work against them on his front foot, and Giga Chikadze has been getting put in his place a lot by front foot pressure style fighters in the division like Arnold Allen, and he absolutely got obliterated by Calvin Kattar in moments in that fight with him. The only way I personally see Giga winning this fight is by catching David Onama and putting him away, especially with his kicks, and I do believe, don't get me wrong, this is not writing off Giga Chikadze at all. I do believe there is a pretty solid chance of that happening, but I just don't think it's the majority of the time. So I can see Onama winning this fight by finish or by decision with his pressure, his power, and his combinations, and even easier if he's able to implement his grappling in this fight as well, which I think would be a super smart decision for him. But if he decides to get a bit reckless with Giga Chikadze in this fight, I could see him getting caught and finished in this fight almost certainly if he gets reckless. The guy has shown that he can get rocked a lot in his fights. I've seen it plenty of times. It worries me a lot. But he's also shown a good ability to recover and a good ability to bounce back and win in the later rounds of fights where he's been rocked in the first round. So I really do think Giga slows down a lot as well when he's on the receiving end of a beatdown. He tends to crumble a little bit under pressure, and David Onama is just a really solid pressure fighter, guys. His ability to fire kicks it really does slow down. I'm talking about Giga Chikadze here, and he does seem to just lose accuracy. Like, I'm looking at the accuracy drop-off in the fight with Arnold Allen. 42% landed in the first, 32% landed in the second, and by the third, he was landing 28% accuracy. He just doesn't deal well with consistent pressure and a heavy-paced fighter. I'm going to go with David Onama by KO or decision by pressuring Giga Chikadze heavy in this fight with his heavy output and power punches. This is a close fight to pick though. I could see Giga Chikadze by KO as a solid prop for those wanting to bet on him, since I personally think that's his way of winning this fight, by catching David Onama, that is. So look out for that bet. Moving on to the co-main event of the card, Anthony Smith versus Mingyang Zhang. I have no idea why they matched Anthony Smith up against Zhang Mingyang. Since this is probably going to be his retirement fight for him, I really wish he retired in his last fight against Dominic Reyes, and it was pretty heartbreaking to see the story where he was talking about that his friend passed away, who was Scott Borton, I believe. It was his coach as well, and he had to go through his training camp, and he fought this fight without his coach and friend in his corner. I feel bad for the dude. He's a very tough dude. I thought he was going to retire because of his last post-fight interview. And as bad as it sounds, Mingyang Zhang will certainly retire Anthony Smith in this fight by KO. I really do think he KOs Anthony Smith. I know I did pick Dominic Reyes to finish Anthony Smith in his last fight, and he did do it. And now I'm picking Zhang Mingyang to do the same. And this is granted that Zhang is not as technical as Dominic Reyes on the feet, but he is still very solid, and he's probably the more powerful of the two, and he's just willing to come forward, and he isn't afraid to take a shot to give a shot at this point in Anthony Smith's career. That's not good. The guy isn't known for being good at trading with fighters. He gets hurt quite often, and he does tend to shoot for the legs of his opponents, and even when he doesn't get it, he ends up in like this position where he's not really finishing the takedown. He's sort of like hugging the leg in bottom position, and he's been finished there quite a few times in his career. So this is a pretty quick pick. I'm going to pick Zhang Mingyang by first round KO over Anthony Smith. It's hard to see Smith getting out of this one unscathed, but I hope he does retire after this loss, and he does take some solid time off. Or he does get into a lot of the analysis work that he seems to do just to keep busy. The guy's a good dude. Wish him the best after this fight. Moving on to the main event of the evening though, Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates. And this is a fight I literally cannot wait for. I've been pretty high on Carlos Prates for a while now, and to see him keep the momentum he's had before and still has, winning by KO every step of the way, it's just insane to me. I do think this is a pretty close fight though. It's not impossible to see a finish for either guy, but I do think that this will be a relatively back and forth fight, whether there is a finish or not. I'll get this out of the way quickly though as well. You guys voted on the poll for who wins this main event, and you guys chose Carlos Prates in a relatively close poll to win this fight, and he's a pretty close underdog with Ian Garry. It's relatively close odds. I personally think Ian has a very solid chance to win this fight, but the way he wins this fight will be by making it boring almost certainly. You guys let me know in the comments below if you think this fight plays out this similar way to what I'm about to explain. But I could see Ian Garry fighting this fight very similarly to how Shavkat tried to fight him in their fight. So like engage somewhat, but stay on the outside and try to out-technique your opponent from range. But if it does get in close, just smother him and clinch wrestle him against the fence the majority of the fight to try to get a decision win, maybe try to secure some takedowns. I could really see this happening if Garry won this fight, since I think the guy is pretty smart. He's a pretty smart dude, guys. He knows how to win his fights. He's not afraid to have the crowd booing him. He's not afraid to have a lackluster performance in terms of entertainment value. He's done it before, guys, and I believe he'll try to do it again here. But if you've watched my videos for a bit now, you'll always know a but is coming. But Ian's gonna find it pretty hard to stay at range with Carlos Prates, because although Carlos is the shorter fighter going into this fight, I believe he's 6'1" and Ian Garry is 6'3", Carlos Prates will have the length advantage with his kicks. I guarantee you he's got the longer legs. And not only that, he also has the longer arms by around 4 inches as well. Carlos Prates is built very strangely. He's got a relatively short torso, but very, very long legs and very long arms. So this will make it even tougher for Ian Garry to stay on the outside, to try to play that tit-for-tat game battle against Prates while avoiding his own shots. And let me say another thing here. I've also been saying this for a while too, and this was in my most devastating knockout power video, I believe, or I can't remember if it was in the most technical striker video in each division. But I mentioned that not only is Carlos Prates very technical in the stand-up, he's also extremely powerful. He's got some very strange power. I honestly believe he packs the hardest punch in the welterweight division currently. And by far, this is by far as well. And this will really play into the judges' scorecards, since this fight will be scored on damage, as they should always score the fights. And I just do think that Ian will try to grapple Prates a bunch in this fight, whether it be takedowns in general or just by clinching against the cage. But I also think that I'm not super worried about that, since Carlos Prates has shown very solid takedown defense overall. And if I'm worried about anything in particular for Carlos Prates, it's probably his cardio, since he's been finishing all his opponents in like the first, second round of his fights. But I don't know, guys. It's hard for me to see Ian Garry hurting Carlos Prates badly in this fight, unless he's able to wear him down drastically in the later rounds of the fight. But I could see Prates hurting Ian Garry multiple times in this fight, at many different points in this fight. So my final prediction for this fight is that it will be a relatively close fight on the feet. Carlos Prates will be able to shuck off some of the clinching and wrestling of Ian Garry, whilst having a relatively close stand-up battle with him. It gets to around the end of the second round, maybe the third round, he ends up hurting Ian pretty bad. Ian's got pretty solid recovery, honestly, so he could survive it, but then Prates will hurt him again and finish him probably in the third or fourth round of this fight by TKO. I know this is a little specific here, so I'm not expecting anyone to jump on that in particular. I just thought it'd be fun to sort of like map out how I might see how this fight is going. I really do think there is a strong possibility of that happening, as much as I believe there's a strong possibility as well of Ian Garry like stinking this fight up and getting a pretty boring decision win. I will still be picking Carlos Prates to get this one done as the underdog in the main event, guys. Probably not betting on this fight though, unless like maybe the odds widen on Carlos Prates. Maybe I might chuck a bet on it. I'll have to see. It'll be a decision for me later down this week. And I'm also curious to see what all the prediction channels are picking for this main event too. So that's my full card predictions and breakdown for UFC Fight Night Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates, guys. If you guys have any thoughts or any questions for me regarding the card, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to respond to every single comment left in the comment section below. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time.